Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. We are just hours away from Monday Night Football between the Steelers and Dolphins here in Week 15. We're going to be going live for tonight's game starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Me and Ponzi will be live on the channel for over an hour of pregame coverage, followed by live play-by-play and analysis of the game itself. And then, of course, we have our extensive post-game reaction coverage as well. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Join the largest individually run Steelers news program anywhere here on YouTube. And join us for tonight's watch party. It should be a lot of fun. We got giveaways, all that great stuff. We're going to be reacting to the game together. So if you guys want to come watch the game with us tonight, it starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. But I did want to get in front of a camera here today, guys, before we go live in studio. I'm about to head into the office here after I'm done recording this. But we have some updates here that I want to kind of give to you guys here last minute before tonight's game. Some injury updates, and then I'm going to tell you about the stakes of tonight's game. The thing that's at stake tonight for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not the division. It's not, your hopes of making the playoffs. I don't think that this is necessarily a must-win game for the Steelers, but there is something very important at stake for this football team tonight. So make sure you guys stick around in today's video to see what that is. But first, let's start with some injury updates here. Unexpectedly, running back Jaylen Warren popped up on the injury report today as he woke up with an illness. Now, reports are coming out by Tom Pelissero right now that he is getting fluids and that he looks like he's going to be trying to give it a go tonight. But that could potentially limit his workload in tonight's game, and that could mean we see more of rookie running back Caleb Johnson. Now, obviously, I think Kenny Gainwell is also going to get a pretty hefty workload tonight. He's been very good. He had over 100 yards rushing in the game Warren missed in Ireland back in Week 4, so we know Kenny Gainwell, is capable of stepping up if the team needs him to. But in a game like this, where it's going to be cold, like it was at Iowa, and you want to kind of wear down an opponent like the Miami Dolphins, a team that has a reputation of being a little bit soft in these cold weather kind of environments, Caleb Johnson is exactly the type of running back that this Steelers team drafted to be an effective, wear you down kind of running back in these types of environments. Late in the season, cold weather, AFC North kind of football. This is why you draft Caleb Johnson. So it would not shock me tonight if we see Caleb have his best game of his career, get a pretty hefty workload compared to what we're used to seeing from him, especially in the second half if the Steelers have a lead. Once we get to that, if we get to the point in this game where the Steelers are trying to run clock, where they're trying to run the football, trying to be methodical, and try to keep the ball away from the Miami Dolphins. I think Caleb Johnson, we could see more of him as this game goes on, especially if Jaylen Warren, as the game progresses, isn't feeling all that well and needs to, not take as many snaps. It's going to be interesting to see how the run game dynamic works for the Pittsburgh Steelers tonight because, it would be sweet if we had like a Michael Jordan-esque, flu game from Jaylen Warren tonight. We know he's extremely talented and can make guys miss in space, and with the weather tonight, even though it's not going to be super windy out, it is going to be extremely cold. So I do think both teams are going to try and get the run game going today. And speaking of the other side of that dynamic here, Derrick Harmon is going into tonight's game with a questionable designation. I kind of waited. I was going to put this video out earlier in the morning because I was hoping we were going to get an update on Harmon, but at the time of me recording this video, we do not have an update on Derrick Harmon. Now, the latest indication is that he's going to play. He practiced at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday with his teammates, and things are starting to point in the direction of him playing tonight. But if he doesn't play tonight, and if you're watching this and the news has come out that Derrick is not going to be able to play tonight, that's going to be a big blow to the Pittsburgh Steelers run defense in this game. We've been talking about it pretty extensively throughout the week here, that this Steelers run defense gives up almost 100 more yards per game on the ground without Harmon than with him. So to have Harmon there tonight to try and stop Devon Achane would be absolutely huge, okay? And if he's out, it's going to be equally as huge in the negative direction. So that injury update, whenever we get it, is going to completely change the dynamic and the feel of this football game, in my opinion, because Derrick Harmon in the middle of your defensive line, I think, is that important to the foundation of your run defense. And if he doesn't play tonight, I do think that Devon Achane, if he can stay healthy for all four quarters, is probably going to have a very good game and probably get over 100 yards rushing in this game, maybe even more. And, it's certainly going to be an interesting dynamic here tonight. So I'll probably put out a short whenever we do get the injury update on Derrick Harmon, so keep your eye out for that. And of course, we'll talk about it during the pregame show on the live watch party tonight. But I also want to talk a little bit here about the dynamics in the AFC playoff race, specifically in the AFC North, the divisional race. The Baltimore Ravens caught a little bit of a break last night, as not only did they dominate the Cincinnati Bengals, increasing their chances of keeping their season alive and their divisional championship hopes alive, but also in 2 weeks they have to play the Green Bay Packers, and they just lost Micah Parsons for the rest of this season. ACL tear for the star edge rusher. It looks like they're also going to be without Christian Watson for a little bit, a really good receiver for a while. He hurt his shoulder yesterday. Zach Tom, their starting right tackle, left the game with an injury. Like, there's a lot of injuries for the Packers yesterday, and that's going to make the Ravens' chances of going into Lambeau in 2 weeks and coming out with a win a little bit better. Now, I still think the Packers are a good football team, and the Ravens, I think, probably played their best game, at least defensively, of the season yesterday in Cincinnati. But it's going to be another really cold weather game, and of course the Packers can run the football very, very well. Lamar Jackson, I think he was 8 of 12 yesterday against Cincinnati. It's not like Lamar played out of his mind great yesterday either. So this is still a Ravens team that has its holes and its issues, and they could certainly still lose to Green Bay. But without having to face Micah, without having to face Christian Watson, without having to face potentially Zach Tom, that's going to make their road to a victory in Green Bay a little bit easier. So just keep that in mind once we approach Week 17. But I think tonight's game does have something at stake for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, I don't think it's a must-win. Okay, if you lose tonight, and pretty much the way it breaks down is that if you win against Cleveland and then you win against Baltimore, the final 2 games of the year, you have an over 99% chance of making the playoffs and winning the division. So those last 2 games are really what's important for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the end of the day. But it would be really nice if the Steelers could lock up the division before they have to play the Ravens again, because obviously in those types of environments, it's essentially a playoff game. If we get to that point where the Steelers have to win in Week 18 at home versus Baltimore, I still think they can do it. It's just you'd much rather not have to deal with that stress of essentially playing an early playoff game versus the Baltimore Ravens in Pittsburgh in the season finale. So if you win tonight, the opportunity to still do that and wrap up the division over the next 3 games is going to be very much still alive. Okay, you'll still have that 1-game advantage over the Baltimore Ravens in the division, and if you can beat both Detroit and Cleveland, you're going to put yourself in a really good situation to lock up the division, because Baltimore would have to win both against the Patriots and against the Packers to even have a shot in Week 18. Which I don't think is very likely. I think they might have a 10-15% chance of beating both the Patriots and the Packers over these next 2 weeks. So if the Steelers can go on a little bit of a run here and win against Miami tonight, Detroit next week, and Cleveland, that's going to put them in position really nicely to wrap up the division before we even get to Week 18. But even if you win tonight and then you lose in Detroit, you still have the possibility of wrapping up the division before Week 18, because theoretically you could beat Cleveland, and then if the Ravens lose both games here coming up against the Patriots and the Packers, which I think is actually more likely than them winning both of those games, I still don't think that's the most likely scenario. I think they probably maybe win one of the next 2 games. But I do think it's more likely they lose both of these games than win both of these games. And if the Steelers win tonight and then beat Cleveland, and then the Ravens lose both of their upcoming games, the Steelers have the division locked up. So tonight, what's at stake for the Pittsburgh Steelers is not the division. It's not a playoff berth yet, but I think tonight what's at stake is the opportunity to potentially lock up the division before we play the Ravens in Week 18. Because if you lose tonight, the division race is back to tied in the AFC North, and the only way the Steelers can wrap up the division before they play the Ravens again is if the Steelers win both against Detroit and Cleveland, and then Baltimore loses both against the Patriots and the Packers. And that scenario playing out, it's still technically possible, but it's definitely a lot less likely than if the Steelers can pull out a win tonight at home on Monday Night Football versus the Miami Dolphins. So that's where I'm at with this football game, guys. Kind of like last week, I don't consider this a must-win. Even if the Steelers lost to the Ravens last week, I would probably consider this week a must-win, but because you got that win in Baltimore last week, you do have a little bit of wiggle room here to take a loss. But obviously, this is a game that you would really like to have. I mean, obviously, the best case scenario for the Steelers is that we're going into Week 18 against the Ravens already having the division locked up, and I think the only way that that's possible or really within grasp is if the Steelers win tonight. So that is officially, in my opinion, what is at stake here tonight. So it's going to be a very interesting evening. Make sure you guys join us at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for over an hour of pregame coverage on the Steelers Talk Live watch party. We're going to have super chat giveaways. We're going to have raffles. We're going to be, of course, watching the game together, and it's going to be just a lot of fun, guys. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll see you guys later at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight, and until then, here we go, Steelers.